Here, really cool, gorgeous. Oh, hang on, I just had an epiphany. Hey guys, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather and this is my garden. So we are probably at the very peak of this garden. I don't think that the garden is going to get more beautiful this season. It's kind of what happens. The garden kind of starts out a little bit slow and then starts to really grow, and it has this peak where it's beautiful and lush and really just full of food, and then we plateau there for a tiny bit, but eventually, you know, disease, bugs, weeds, everything starts to take over and the garden has its just natural decline. So as I mentioned, we are at the peak and we are just now starting to harvest huge slicer tomatoes. I actually weighed this one for you guys and it is 30 ounces. This is a monster tomato. I weighed it and I want to show it to you because I think this is probably the biggest one we're going to have this year. But we have lots and lots of tomatoes on the vine. A lot of them, probably most of them, are going to be over 1 pound, and we do have a few to harvest today. This one here is a Belgian giant. I got my seeds originally from M.I. Gardener, but this tomato plant itself actually did volunteer from a plant that I had last year, and the kids grew this in their garden, which essentially the nutrition is made up of cow manure and chicken manure, so they did a good job. This tomato, as you can see, it has a really interesting shape. This kind of tomato that has this weird kind of fusions and things on the bottom and looks kind of crazy, this is the result of a fasciated blossom, or a blossom that is fused together with lots of blossoms. So I think probably technically this is several different tomatoes all fused into one, and usually these guys don't really ripen at the same rate all the way around, and sometimes they can get really gnarly yucky spots on the bottom, but this one actually looks really good and there's a lot of usable fruit here. I was actually looking over to my right because I have one here. Here's an example. Same type of tomato, but this one was created with just one blossom. You can see it's got a perfect little button end there. So we've got here what can come out of a fasciated blossom and then your standard regular old tomato. They're both delicious. You might notice that I plucked this tomato off before it was fully ripe all the way up the shoulders. These kinds of tomatoes, the Belgian Giants, really do better when you pick them at this stage. A lot of heirlooms will ripen first on the bottom and then gradually ripen up to the top. And sometimes if you leave them on the vine, by the time that their shoulders are ripe, the bottom is starting to rot. And actually, if you cut one of these open with the green top like this, you'll find that the redness is through and through. It's just a little bit green on the skin only, and is totally edible and totally delicious. So we're going to start the garden tour by coming through the archway as we normally would. This is so magical and incredible right now, you guys. As some of you know, I haven't really been feeling well this week, and this has been such a place of peace and refuge. It's been so great to hang out here. The birdhouse gourds are huge. There's so many of them too. You might notice too that there's quite a few of those little brown dead ones. I think that this is just a result of the gourd not being pollinated. It doesn't really matter. These plants have put on so much fruit that it's kind of par for the course that some of these are going to get missed. And you guys might remember that we had some volunteer ground cherries come up in the bed here, and these gourds have made it so shady in here that these guys are getting really long. They're reaching for the light. They look like they're prematurely dropping some of their fruits here. See these? Now ground cherries will drop their fruit, but usually not until they're ripe. I actually don't feel much of anything on the inside. I actually have ground cherries in a few other places, so we'll probably see some good ones, but there's like nothing on the insides of these, and I can only imagine. Oh, there's something. That kind of looks like a bug of some sort got to that one. This one has a little hole on the side too. I wonder if it's dropping because of bugs and not because of the shade. Look, there's a hole in that one. This one actually might be ripe. It is. So you see how the outside husk is yellow and papery, and one that's not ready is green like this and still has a lot of vitality in it, but this one is ripe and ready. So good. Definitely a favorite garden treat, especially of Levi. I don't know overall how well these plants are going to do because they are getting pretty shaded out, but They are still trying. Here's the other side of the archway, and I do have a couple tomato plants underneath here. They are also getting shaded out, but they are starting to produce. This one here is a brandywine. These are easily over a pound. And there's actually a brandywine on this side too, also pretty well hidden. Over here on the other side of the archway, I do have a couple different pepper plants that I think I am gonna harvest from today. This, I think, is a California Wonder Pepper. We grew a lot of these last year and froze a bunch of them. So I have a lot of them still all cubed up and frozen, and I have freeze-dried some. But these are really amazing for stuffed peppers. I'm gonna grab a couple of these so we can do that this week. Peppers are one of those plants too that you'll get several successions of blooms out of throughout the season as long as you keep them picked. Generally, I like to kind of leave them as, I've called it, our living pantry, so that we can come out and just kind of get them as needed. The time clock for using these is definitely ticking as soon as I pick it, but they last quite a long time in the refrigerator. And as I said, if we pick them, we can get more blooms, which equals more fruit later on. Over in here, I had left a couple different peppers on the plant last week because they hadn't quite turned purple. These ones are really cool. They're called Violet Sparkle Pepper, and I think I got these seeds from Baker Creek. It was a few years ago, and they're just so beautiful. This is basically a lunchbox style pepper, but they also are really thick walled. Let me show you. You can see in there, they got a nice thick wall, so you can absolutely use these pretty much in the same way that you could use any kind of bell pepper, and they taste exactly the same. They're just prettier. We have some black Hungarian jalapenos in here. These, I thought they'd be a little bit bigger. The jalapenos that I grew last year were called Craig's Grande, and Grande meaning big might mean that they are a larger variety. Oh, there's some bigger ones in the bottom here. See, these are pretty good sized. So I need to think about exactly what I'm gonna make with those this year. We grew jalapenos last year, like I mentioned, and I made a whole bunch of things. I did cowboy candy, I made salsas, and I also had a fermented hot sauce made out of jalapenos. It was really good. I've got to ask Levi what he wants me to do this year. I know that we're going to be making some hot sauce out of these guys. These are Sugar Rush Peach hot peppers. As far as I know, they're going to turn orange when they are ripe. There's a whole bunch of them on the plant, and I'm sure we could eat them at this point. They are hot, but I'm gonna wait for them to get their color. These have tons of blooms on them. I've never grown this variety before, but it reminds me a lot of the Tabasco in the way that it grows. We have finally started to see a few little beans coming on. I really want this to be a big bean year for us, so I've planted a whole bunch of different bean plants. This one is a contender bush bean, has little purple flowers. I'm also growing Blue Lake bush beans. Those have white flowers, and these plants are just barely starting to produce, so I'm only getting a few every other day or so, but here's to hoping we get lots and lots more. I've got quite a few bean plants kind of interspersed here between some other nightshades. This is an eggplant. I don't see very many actual eggplants coming on these plants. They've dealt with a little bit of pest pressure, but I do have one kind of hanging on. Looks good. I've got a few other tomato varieties starting to blush, starting to look like they are ready to pick. This one actually does not ripen to red. And these can be a little bit harder to tell when they are ripe. And this is called blue creamberry, and it ripens to this like little bit of an off-white greenish type cream on the bottom, and then obviously it's got that purple top. And the way that we can tell that these are ripe, partially is because of how easily they just fall off the plant, but also you can kind of give them like a squish test. A ripe tomato feels very different than an unripe tomato. Unripe tomatoes are firm and ripe tomatoes have a little bit of give, and these guys are perfect. And these ones, the red varieties, it's really easy to tell when they have started to ripen. They start to get this little bit of a greeny orangey color, and you can pick them when they first start to change color. I like to do that because we do deal with a little bit of bug and bird pressure in the garden. So when you see a tomato that is starting to ripen like that, if you pick it and leave it on your counter, in just a few days it's going to ripen all the way through, and that can be a really great way to beat the birds to your fresh fruit. This one here, see, it's not quite ripe. This is another Belgian Giant. These guys actually ripen really quickly, and I can see that we're starting to blush on the bottom, so I'm going to put this one in the harvest basket too. Got another tomato here that is starting to ripen, and I can't remember what all of these tomato varieties are. I did a really poor job of marking where I put things this year, but see? Last week it was all about the cucumbers. The cucumbers are really starting to come in heavy, and this week the tomatoes have started. This pretty tomato that I have down here is called the strawberry tomato. Look at that. Isn't that just gorgeous? These are also really, really delicious. I got this seed from Baker Creek as well. Last year in my garden, it was the first tomato to die and succumb to disease. This year, it doesn't appear to be doing that, so that's a good thing. I don't really know what the difference is necessarily. Now, this has been a much wetter year for us, which I would think wouldn't help with disease, but she's hanging on real well. There's a tomato down here that I have been watching real closely. This one is also another fused blossom fruit. So I'm gonna be really careful trying to pick this. Okay. But look at, it's like, it's several tomatoes, but it almost looks like two stuck straight together. This tomato I know because of the black shoulders that it has. This is a Black Beauty tomato, and it's gorgeous. Starting to get a little bit of red down on the base. These purple shoulders turn purple quite early in the development of the tomato, and so you really don't go by the purple part on these. We go by the part that starts out green on the bottom. Eventually that will start to blush, and this is when I pick it. Just like the other ones, it's going to be on my counter for a few days, and once this bottom is nice and red, I'm gonna probably, not with this one, I won't make a tomato sandwich out of this one, but these are really great ones to have fresh because they have just the most lovely smoky flavor that I just love on a slice of bread with some homemade butter. So over here in the kids' garden, it is quite the jungle, to say the least. This is where that big tomato came out of, and I can actually see quite a few big ones that I think I'm gonna pull off today because these are Belgian Giants and they're not going to stay well on the vine if I leave them much longer. See, this is a big one. This one I think might rival the weight of that first one we looked at today. Maybe not. It's close though. Here's an update on their cucumber tent. It's coming along well. They have harvested many a cucumber out of here. And there are quite a few sizable watermelons growing in their watermelon patch. They know exactly where each and every one of them are, and we're watching them closely because our first ripe watermelon is probably about a week away. So last week we came out and got a few elderberries. They're definitely ripe this week, and it looks like, ooh, there are a few Japanese beetles in here, which I do not love, but it looks like a lot of our berries are definitely ripe for the picking. So I think this is a good testament to our bird feeder that we put on the other side of the house. The fact that it's working, because the birds were starting to get a hold of these berries before we put that bird feeder out, and now there's a ton of berries. I need to go get a different basket, probably a bucket. This beautiful, beautiful head, look. Oh, this is amazing. Oh, this is a 7-gallon bucket full to the top of ripe elderberries. What a blessing. I did not expect that. Hello, boys. How are you? Hello. You guys are handsome. So there's quite a few amazing things happening out here on the lane. These are sugar baby watermelons, and these are not close to being harvested, but they are getting pretty heavy. So these melons are gonna get big enough where the stress and the weight of the melons is going to potentially break them off of the vine before they're ready. And oh, this one is bad. Gotta get that off. I don't have what I need quite yet to get these guys supported. What I'd really like to acquire in this coming week is some pantyhose or some stockings, because what you can do is you can actually just slip that around the melon and tie the pantyhose to the trellis, and that's going to help give the melon support as it grows. Some melons, though, they are going to stay small enough where that really isn't going to be an issue. This here is a Charente melon, which is basically just like a cantaloupe. And with these guys, you can actually smell when they are ready to pick. I know just because of the length of time that they've been out here that they are not ready to pick, but if you weren't sure, with this particular type of melon, you can just smell the blossom end, and if it smells really sweet and fruity and delicious, it's probably ripe on the inside. Nope, just smells like a cucumber, which means it's not ripe. My son actually discovered that there's quite a few of them down here on the ground, and I don't think any of them are quite ready, but we should be harvesting melons very soon. There's a bunch down here too. I think these ones are called Minnesota Midget. See that? And of course, we've got our Kajaris, which steal the show every year. Look at that. The Kajaris are a lot easier to tell when they are ready because those dark green parts turn bright, bright orange and they fall off the plant really easily. And now we're getting to the section of the lane, which honestly is beginning to astound me. I still have living winter squash out here. Now, a winter squash isn't a squash that's grown in winter. It's a squash that's grown during the summer with the intention of being able to store them for the winter or through the winter. Usually winter squash varieties like this is a spaghetti squash. If they're taken out to a maturity where they're able to be stored, you can store them for up to around 8 months for most varieties. And that's what I'm looking for out of these. I usually have a very hard time getting winter squash to that kind of storage maturity because the bugs always come for them. And we've had a couple bugs try, but it's been a really great year for bugs, like meaning that we don't really have very many of them. And somebody pointed out, I think it was on the last garden tour, the birds that we've had. The birds have really been the biggest pest in our garden this year, but they're probably the reason that we don't have so many bugs. So if I've got to share a couple little fruits and things with the birds, I will happily do so if this kind of thing is the outcome. Now, we're not out of the woods. We still could, you know, see the demise of these plants before the squash are ready to harvest, but things are looking really good and I'm starting to get excited. Just look at them. These plants are loaded down. These long squash that you see kind of nestled in the center of the lane here, these guys I've actually had great success with in the past. These are tromboncino squash. These guys I've actually had success with in the past. For some reason, the bugs leave them alone. And those guys, when they are ripe, they taste a lot like a butternut, which is great because we like butternut. Over here, I've got a stretch of armpit melons. These are a cross between a Kajari and a Charente. There's lots of little fruits on these. See, this one's a little bit bigger. See how it kind of looks like a Kajari? Here's another one. This one's a little bit bigger. These guys will also get orange where there's dark green when they're ready to harvest. I need to go run and get my harvest basket because there are some birdhouse gourds we're gonna take today. And earlier when I was down here, I thought I saw some honeydew as well. I gotta show you that. Here it is. Pretty sure that this is a honeydew right here. That is probably also going to need some support. Bust out my scissors for these. So we have birdhouse gourds in the raised bed garden, but we've also got them out here. I planted them out of fear. In the spring I planted this many plants because originally when I had planted this whole lane, some kind of bug, I think pill bugs or maybe even rodents, came down and ate every single plant that I had. And I thought I would have nothing in this space. So I just kind of stuck in whatever seeds I had, and birdhouse gourd was some of those seeds. So we've got more birdhouse gourd out here. Thankfully, these are really delicious. I actually had one of these with lunch today. I just sliced it into quarters and put some salt and pepper on it, and it was so good. They're actually firm enough too where I feel like you could cut them in half, kind of hollow them out and use them like you would like a hollowed out zucchini to make those like breadless sandwiches. It would totally work. Ooh, look here. Looks like the squash bugs have found this plant. This is a round zucchini. I've been looking in here and I see a couple little zucchinis that are so unique. Look at these. This particular plant is putting on little zucchinis that have a yellow top. Oh, there is one down here. Hang on. Hang on, I just had an epiphany. This is not a zucchini. This is a pumpkin. So remember how I told you guys that I was really bad about marking things and I just planted things feverishly? I thought this is called batwing pumpkin, and I knew that I had planted some, but I completely forgot. That's what this little pumpkin is supposed to look like, and I planted them for my kids. Aw, isn't it awesome? Well, that's cool because I knew I didn't want this much round zucchini. That's so neat. I don't think I've ever seen a pumpkin grow in this way. Super cool. I probably snapped this guy off a little bit prematurely. It doesn't have super hard skin on it yet, so it might not last very long, but we're going to enjoy looking at it in the meantime. I'm gonna guess that that is what this is too, right next to it, but I don't see any fruits on this one quite yet. I do have quite a few cucumbers out here. This one is the Bait Alpha Slicer Cucumber. And then I'm also growing some gherkins. We have been getting buckets of cucumbers every single week. And so I know I'm gonna need more than just my harvest basket here. So I think I'm gonna come out after dinner and grab these guys. So the greenhouse is looking really well. This lovely squash, there's actually 2 squash plants here. These are scallop squash. They're still alive. They're starting to look a tiny bit sick, but honestly, she's earned it. She's given us so many little fruits. I actually haven't noticed many new blossoms in quite a while. So this plant might be kind of naturally petering out, which is totally fine. Here's a little one. Well, I guess this is pretty good size for what you want to harvest. It's pretty bizarre for me to see like a plant essentially reach the end of its production all on its own and not just be eaten down by bugs first. It's kind of crazy. I ordered plenty more of those seeds. And this is actually a succession planting of the white scallop squash. So you can see a little baby right there. This is the same thing. You can see the little baby right there. And a few weeks ago, I got a wild hair in me and decided I would plant some okra inside the greenhouse. So I stuck it in the middle of the greenhouse here, since the greenhouse is the tallest in the center. These are gonna get pretty tall, and I noticed today that there's one little tiny baby okra coming on, and I think that this is the Alabama red okra. Little tiny baby okra right there. So we've got this plant here, there's one right next to it, and then over by our big squash, there's one right there. These here are the Blue Lake bush beans. They kind of don't look super healthy, but we're still getting lots of flowers and some little beans. Just not any to really harvest quite yet, but pretty soon. I had planted a whole bunch of beans too. I think that these are dragon tongue bush beans. And then there's more here behind the beans. They just really have barely started to flower, but as I mentioned, we'll be in beans pretty soon. This looks like it might be the bush style Sugar Eddy squash, which is excellent. I've got another one of those on the end that we'll look at. On my way down to that squash plant though, I am gonna start to harvest our black-eyed peas. I've already done one harvest of black-eyed peas before, and we got quite a lot out of our first harvest, but this is what I'm looking for. The pods on here start out green and then they start to swell, and you can see the little beans forming, but not until the pod is dry and brown like this do we harvest it, because what we're after is the little peas on the inside. Whoop, dropping one. That's how volunteers happen. Whoop, dropped two. See? There they are, little black-eyed peas. These black-eyed peas have been absolutely incredible. I didn't realize they were going to get this tall. Online I had read that they would get about 4 feet tall. Turns out it's more like 10 or 12. Pretty sure it's about 7 feet high to that purlin right there. And then they're going well beyond it, and some of them are starting to kind of curl back down. So they're loving life over here. And same thing with the purple hull pink-eyed peas. These guys are a little bit less full than the black-eyed peas. I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that I amended this row here at the end of last year, and I did not amend this row. So you can kind of see the difference. Now, they are 2 separate varieties as well, and some varieties of beans, or really any plant, will act a little bit different than another variety, but I think there's a little bit of a nutrition gap over on this side anyhow. But it's still, they're still doing really well, super tall. And the purple hull peas are starting to show us the reason for their name. They are not ready to pick yet, but they're getting there. So over here, tucked into the corner of the greenhouse, I have a bush style Sugar Eddy. So online I read that this plant does not actually act like a bush style plant. Like that batwing pumpkin, that's a bush style, kind of like how a zucchini grows. But this is much more vining than the seed pack said that it would be, which is fine. Got some nice big fruit. The rinds are starting to harden on these. You can't even really tell that I am poking it with my fingernail, and so these guys are getting close. I'm excited. I noticed the other day that this vine is starting to go outside the greenhouse. You see it out here? It's totally allowed. It should be fine. And another thing that I noticed while I was out here is that my favorite volunteer cherry tomato, that yellow currant tomato, it has volunteered on the side of the greenhouse here. Whenever I can, I like to let my volunteers just grow, and this is one of those times where it's completely fine. This is not in my way at all. We get to reap the delicious benefits of something we didn't plan on getting. So guys, I'm gonna end the garden tour right here. Thank you so much for joining me in the garden again today. So now we are officially in the harvest and preservation season. I'm so excited, and I'll see you guys again soon.